Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's webinar for the 2019 Systems for Action Research Call for Proposals. Thank you for joining us for this webinar this morning. The purpose of this webinar is to describe in greater detail the 2019 Call for Proposals for the RWJF Systems for Action Research Program. We'll give you an introduction to this research program for those who may not be familiar with it. We'll step through some of the major components of the 2019 Call for Proposals, which is, if you're familiar with this program and you've seen some of our past call for research proposals, the call this year is a little bit different, a little bit more focused. So we will go into some of those focused areas today. We'll also describe a little bit about the mechanics of developing and submitting a proposal through the RWJF online proposal submission system. And then we should also have time at the end of today's webinar for answering any questions that you may have. So with that, I'm going to step us through the session and get our session underway. My name is Glenn Mays. I'm a professor and chair of the Department of Health Systems Management and Policy at the University of Colorado School of Public Health, and I direct the Systems for Action National Program Office and the Systems for Action Coordinating Center in partnership with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Just a few notes on housekeeping for today's session. We are recording this webinar sessions, and we will be posting this recording as well as the slides from today's session on the Systems for Action webpage and website at the conclusion of today's webinar for those who may not be able to join us. And we'll also be sending, for those of you who have registered online for this webinar, you'll also receive a link to the recording and the slides at the end of today's session. Just a note for everyone who's with us, either online through your computer or on the phone line on the dial-up connection, you are muted during this webinar, and that just helps us manage the large number of attendees on today's session. You can submit questions, however, using the chat box or the Q&A function. If you're with us on the online web portion of today's call, you can use that Q&A button to submit your questions at any time during today's webinar. You don't have to wait till we get to the Q&A section to do that. If you got a question, let me encourage you to go ahead and type it into that Q&A box, and we'll get to those questions during the latter stages of today's webinar. Okay, for our agenda for today, I'm going to again spend a few minutes giving you an introduction to the RWJF Systems for Action Research Program for those who may be less familiar with the program. And then we'll step right into the details of the 2019 Call for Proposals, some of the major ingredients and the focus areas for this year's Call for Research. We'll talk, then, as I mentioned, talk a bit about the mechanics of how to apply, how to actually submit a proposal through the RWJF online system. Then we'll get to your questions. And again, as a reminder, at the bottom of this slide, you'll see the email for the Systems for Action program is just systemsforaction@ucdenver.edu. Encourage you to use that if you have questions that come up after the webinar today or in the process of submitting your application. You can use that email address and get to our Systems for Action team to respond to those queries. And also, as a reminder, there's a lot of great resources on the Systems for Action website. So please spend some time on that website if you have not yet. It's just systemsforaction.org. So let's jump right in to today's agenda. An introduction to some of our key people. Again, as I mentioned, the National Program Office and National Coordinating Center for the Systems for Action program is based at the University of Colorado. Again, I serve as a program director, and we have a very talented group of staff who work with us on the program, including, importantly for today's webinar, Carrington Lott, who's our program manager. And so she's with us today as well. At the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, our leaders for Systems for Action at RWJF include Carolyn Miller, who's a senior program officer in the Research Evaluation Learning division of RWJF. And Carolyn works closely with Dr. Octavia Wojcik, who's also program officer at the Research Evaluation and Learning division. These are just some of the key people that you are likely to encounter with the RWJF Systems for Action program. So some key materials I want to call your attention to. 5 items in particular. First of all is the 2019 Call for Proposals brochure, the funding opportunity brochure. I'm going to make sure that you have accessed that brochure, you download it, and you read it carefully. It's 10 pages, but it's easy to get through. And you can see that it's the first item on this slide, the URL. You can access it through the Systems for Action webpage. It's also available on the RWJF webpage, on the Funding Opportunity Summary webpage at RWJF. But please make sure to download, read that full 10-page document carefully. It will describe the program, the rationale. Importantly, it will describe the focus areas for this year's 2019 call. It will describe the criteria that will be used for reviewing and evaluating proposals, as well as information about how to submit your proposal. So very, very important to read that 10-page document carefully. Second item is just a link to the RWJF Funding Opportunity Summary, which is a more abbreviated summary of this funding opportunity. And from that webpage, you also can link into the RWJF online proposal application submission system. So that's another important URL to have with you. The third item on this slide is a link to the Systems for Action updated research agenda. The Systems for Action program is now in its 5th year of life as a research program of the foundation, and our work is guided by a research agenda originally developed in 2015 and that was updated earlier this year with input from our National Advisory Committee as well as a variety of stakeholders involved in the program. So we encourage you to take a look at that research agenda document, which describes the kinds of evidence that we're trying to build through this research program, the types of research questions that we're trying to answer through the studies that are supported in this program. And again, we recently updated that research agenda. So even if you're familiar with the program, if you've seen this research agenda, reviewed it in previous years, encourage you to take a look at the updated agenda, research agenda that was updated again just earlier this year, back in the spring. The fourth item that I would encourage you to take a look at is again on the Systems for Action website, and that's our summary of currently funded studies. We have funded already more than 20 studies through the Systems for Action research program, all studies helping us learn about how to align medical, social, and public health systems. And by reviewing the studies that we funded in previous rounds of this program, you'll get a better sense of the type of evidence that we're trying to build, the type of evidence that we've already been able to derive through previous waves of research, and that will again help you think about how your research idea might be best positioned to fit within the priorities of this program. And certainly, you don't want to propose a study on a topic that's already been funded in the program. We're always looking for new evidence and answering questions that have yet to be fully addressed on the agenda. The final item on here, the fifth item on here of key materials, is a link to a virtual workshop that we conducted earlier this year with some of our previous and currently funded research teams from the Systems for Action program, allowing you to hear from these research teams about the processes, the strategies that they used in developing a successful research proposal for the Systems for Action program. So I encourage you to take a look at that recorded virtual workshop. You may get some useful tips and strategies from some of our successful applicants from previous rounds, previous calls for research under the S4A program. So 5 items here that just to call your attention to, encourage you to take a look at those items as you're developing your research idea, moving toward submission of an application for this year's call. Okay, so a little bit more about the S4A research program. Again, Systems for Action is a signature research program of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation that was developed as part of the Foundation's Culture of Health Action framework. And we're one of the signature research programs that is charged with building evidence to support the Culture of Health Action framework, and importantly, to give us evidence about how to activate key drivers, key action areas and key drivers within this Culture of Health Action framework. So it's important to be familiar with the Culture of Health Action framework of the Foundation to understand how our System for Action research program fits in and the type of evidence that we're trying to build. In particular, of these 4 action areas in the framework, action area number 4, which has to do with strengthening integration of health services and systems, is an action area that's particularly relevant for Systems for Action because of our focus on integrating medical, social, and public health systems. And so all of the studies that we fund under S4A are certainly relevant to that action area number 4 and that are building evidence to support, tell us how we can best activate the drivers under action area 4. But also many of our studies also relate to some of these other 3 action areas, including the others that you see here on this framework. So we encourage you to be familiar with Culture of Health Action framework, understand how the S4A program fits into this framework. Systems for Action, as we mentioned, it's a research program designed to support research studies, rigorous research studies that can provide us with evidence about how to align delivery and financing systems in the medical, social, and public health sectors in ways that can improve health and well-being, as well as help to advance the cause of health equity. And so we're interested in, again, the studies that we fund are all implicate all 3 of those sectors: medical care, public health, and social services sectors. And these are all studies that are testing mechanisms for aligning delivery and financing systems across those 3 sectors: medical, social, and public health services. Again, we encourage you to take a look at the research agenda for more information about how we define some of those concepts in the context of the research we support and some of the important priority areas in this larger research agenda. And again, why do we focus on these issues? Well, we know from lots of evidence and experience that our medical care delivery and financing systems are often not well connected to the delivery and financing systems that support public health and social services, a range of other services that are important for addressing social, economic, and environmental determinants of health. Often our programs and services and workforce that operate in medicine and in public health and in social services operate largely in silos, and we're not really designed to have strong connections across sectors. And so with this program, we are testing innovative ways of connecting, aligning activities across these 3 sectors of medical care, public health, and social services, with the goal of improving health on a population-wide basis and promoting and advancing health equity. In order to accomplish this goal of system alignment, many of our studies are designed to to test ways of overcoming the challenges of collective action, getting organizations and people that work in different sectors, different domains of activities, helping those sectors work together toward common goals. And so addressing some of these well-known collective action problems that have been documented in lots of prior studies and that are often encountered in real world of practice in medical care, public health, and social services. We use a wide lens in terms of the sectors that are relevant for alignment in this program. In those three broad areas of medical care, public health, and social services. The slide just describes some of the more specific areas of sectors in areas of activity that are potentially relevant to systems for action research. On the social services side, again, we're interested, in potentially connecting into sectors such as education and workforce development, housing, transportation, the criminal and juvenile justice sectors, child and family services, economic development, community development, sectors that are involved with income support and in addressing economic needs of families and communities. Just some of the relevant sectors that may be relevant to alignment strategies that are of interest in part of your research interests. Key ingredients of studies that are supported under the Systems for Action program. Number one, we're looking for studies that are proposing to test a novel way of aligning systems across those three broad areas of medical, social, and public health systems. What we call these system alignment mechanisms. So we're looking for studies that are proposing to test novel, innovative ways of aligning systems across the medical, social, and public health sphere. So that's important. Innovation and the novelness of the alignment mechanism. Second, this is a research program, so we're looking for rigorous scientific methods to be used to give us evidence, strong evidence about the implementation and the impact of the system alignment mechanism being studied. Third, this is a for-action research program. Those last two words of our title, and that means we prioritize building evidence that can be rapidly moved into action in real-world communities, and that requires engaging stakeholders from the relevant systems, medical, social, and public health, engaging those stakeholders in the research process, in the design and conduct of the research, so that the findings can be most rapidly moved into practice in collaboration with those stakeholders. And then finally, we use an explicit health equity lens in this research program, and so studies should be designed to evaluate the impact of the system alignment mechanism through an explicit lens that focuses on health equity. We want to understand the impact of the alignment mechanisms under study on health equity and drivers of health equity. Our overall program structure, as I mentioned, this program was started about 5 years ago. This is the fourth round, the fourth call for proposals that we've had over the program's life cycle. And so we have a number of research studies that are underway through the S4A program now. This research is coordinated and through a coordinating center that is again based at the University of Colorado. Our center functions as a national program office for the program. We also have 3 collaborating research centers which help us develop and build lines of research in the important areas of interest under the S4A research program. Those collaborating research centers are based in Chicago, in Indiana, and in Arizona. And you can find more information about the collaborating research centers and the work underway there on our website. And then in the outer ring, we have an expanding array of individual research projects that have been funded through various, through the 3 and now this 4th call for proposals under S4A. And these are studies that are underway in all across the country in different community contexts. And again, you can see descriptions of all of the research that has been funded under prior rounds of S4A on the Systems for Action website, systemsforaction.org. And we definitely encourage you to take a look at those existing studies. As I mentioned, the 2019 call for proposals is a little bit different from the calls that we have issued, the last 3 calls that we've issued over the prior 3 years. And in particular, we've got somewhat more narrower focus in the 2019 call for proposals. We are focusing in on a few areas where we still have some significant gaps in evidence about how to align medical, social, and public health systems. And so for applications that are submitted under the 2019 call for proposal, to be responsive to this call, your application needs to address the 4 research priorities that are outlined on this slide. These are also described in greater detail in the funding opportunity brochure. Each of these 4 elements your proposal needs to address in order to be responsive. Number 1, we are looking for proposals that are proposing to study a system alignment mechanism that is designed and implemented principally in the social services sector or the public health sector rather than the medical care sector. This is an area where we have really very limited evidence about system alignment mechanisms that operate primarily outside of the medical care sector. And so in this round, the 2019 call, we're looking for studies that are proposing to test an alignment mechanism that is designed and implemented principally outside of the medical care sector, being in the social services and or public health sector. So we call that an outside-in mechanism for system alignment because it exists largely outside of the medical care system. Secondly, we're looking for studies that are proposing to that include a focus on financing or other kinds of incentives for system alignment. This is another area where we've got some large gaps in the evidence base. And so we're looking for studies that will include as part of the research a focus on financing or other types of financial or non-financial incentives to support system alignment across sectors. Third, this round, we're looking for proposals that are evaluating system-level impact and system-level change. So studies that are designed to study the impact of the alignment mechanism on system-level operations and outcomes, rather than purely studies that focus on individual-level, person-level, or patient-level impact. So that's a third element, very important for applications this year, a focus on system-level change and impact. And then fourth, as always, applications submitted under this year's call need to include an explicit focus on evaluating impact on 1 or more measures of health equity. Again, these criteria, these focus areas are described in greater detail in the funding opportunity brochure, the 10-page brochure, so I encourage you to download that, read that very carefully before you submit your application. As I mentioned earlier, again, as a signature research program of the foundation, all of the studies that we support under Systems for Action also need to have a connection to 1 or more of the foundation's 4 thematic focus areas. The first of which is transforming in health and healthcare systems, and because of this program's focus on aligning systems, we expect any proposal submitted to our program would be responsive and have a connection to this first focus area of building evidence on how to transform health and healthcare systems. The 3 other focus areas, your proposal may or may not have a strong connection to one of the other focus areas, but we encourage you to at least be familiar with these other focus areas as well, and to consider how your application, your idea, might also be relevant to one of these other 4 areas, including advancing healthy children and families, the focus area of leadership for better health, and the focus area of building and supporting healthy communities. And you can read more about the foundation's 4 focus areas in the funding opportunity brochure and on the RWJF website on the link that's shown here at the bottom of the slide. A few other important criteria. Again, if you encourage you to read that funding opportunity brochure very carefully, we spell out all of the criteria that will be used in reviewing applications. One other important criteria is the expertise of the research team that you're proposing. And because this is a research program that focuses on integrating multiple sectors, you need to put together a team that's got broad and multidisciplinary expertise that is relevant to the system alignment mechanism that you're proposing to study. And in particular, you want to make sure you have on your team people with expertise in all three of the sectors that are relevant in this program: medical care, public health, and social services. You can find out more information about how we define these three sectors for the purposes of the Systems for Action program, again, in the funding opportunity brochure, as well as in our S4A research agenda. So encourage you to take a careful look at that. Other considerations, as I mentioned already, this is a 4-action research program, so we're very important for applications to be designed with a focus on the stakeholders who are going to actually use the scientific knowledge that your study will create, and what your proposal will do to facilitate, to help those stakeholders make use of the evidence that's created through your research. So you want to pay attention to that. Think about stakeholder engagement and research dissemination and translation as part of your proposal. Lots of different ways to achieve stakeholder engagement, including some of the strategies that you see on this slide: practice-based research networks, CVPR, or other types of engagement that can encourage you to think creatively and be innovative in how you engage stakeholders and how you think about translating and disseminating findings. So these are all very important for our program. A little bit more about the details of the award. This is also a bit, in the 2019 call this year, we've changed both the duration as well as the size of the research awards that are available. We are now funding studies for up to 36 months in duration. So your proposal can be for a study that will last up to 3 years. And for a total cost of up to $500,000 in total funding per award. And so that's a little bit longer and a little bit larger awards than what we have used in prior calls of the Systems for Action program. So important to think about. And again, we're looking for strong research, ideally, strong designs that can support, can build evidence about the causal impact of the system alignment strategies that are under study. We're always interested in innovative uses of research methods and innovative uses of novel data sources that can give us new insight into ways of aligning medical, social, and public health systems. Some quick notes on eligibility. This funding opportunity is open to applicant organizations who are public organizations or nonprofit organizations that are tax exempt under Section 501c3 of the IRS code. So the lead applicant organization needs to meet that criteria. It also needs to be based in the U.S. or one of its territories. As always, the foundation makes awards to organizations, not to individual investigators. That's important to keep in mind. We encourage multi-organizational consortia to apply, and that often can be useful, having multiple organizations collaborate in a research study. However, you need to have a single eligible organization be designated as the primary applicant in your application. That will be the organization that's responsible for maintaining the agreements with other collaborators and for providing the fiscal infrastructure for supporting the award. And so important to keep in mind. These are also described in the funding opportunity brochure. We are especially interested in receiving applications from individuals and organizations that can give us new insight into how to align systems. And so inclusivity is very, very important in this research program, including people who have backgrounds and life experiences that are underrepresented in the research communities and on research teams. We're very interested in having those individuals receiving applications from those individuals. People and organizations who are new to RWJF and have not received funding from RWJF previously, always encourage you to apply if you're new to the foundation. Third, people from disciplines outside of the health professions and the medical sciences. We're looking for ideas from outside of the health sector as well. And so we encourage applicants who are working in those disciplines that are, again, outside of the health professions. We're also interested in applicants from individuals who are not in traditional academic or research settings, including those who may be working in government agencies or professional associations, nonprofits, and community-based organizations. This is not an opportunity that is limited to the research and academic community. However, it is a research program, so we encourage you, if you're for organizations and people who are applying in a non kind of research-based organization, encourage you to think about, again, partnering with other individuals and making sure you have relevant research expertise on your research team in some way. But you don't need to be in an academic setting or a research institute to be successful with this program. Finally, of course, we encourage interdisciplinary research teams, cross-sector research teams that include people who've got scientific and research expertise, as well as people who have operational experience, practical experience, and and experience in working with community stakeholders. Okay, let me just give you a few details on just the nuts and bolts of the application process. First, we do encourage you to submit a simple one-page letter of intent through the S4A website if possible. This is not required, and it does not obligate you in any way. But it is to your best advantage to submit a letter of intent by the October 4th deadline. It just tells a little bit about your topic, your proposed topic, and your research team. This information, if you send it to us, that will help us make sure that we are able to recruit reviewers who have expertise that is relevant to the topic that you are proposing. So if at all possible, please submit a letter of intent, one-page letter of intent through our website by the end of this week, October 4th. Just has this basic information. Again, it's not required, it's not binding, but it'll help us make sure that we've got relevant expertise on our review, on our external review committee that will be relevant to the topic that you're proposing. Now, the full proposals are due on November 6th by 3 p.m. Eastern Time, November 6th. Must be submitted through the RWJF online proposal application system. And it's a 10-page narrative proposal that needs to be submitted along with a budget and a budget narrative and some ancillary materials about the applicant organization and the leadership of the research team. So that deadline is November 6th, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We will have a review process, and then funding. We anticipate being able to to give notice of funding decisions in the middle of February in 2020, after the review process is complete. Again, the selection criteria are outlined and described in detail in the funding opportunity brochure. Encourage you to take a close look at these 7 criteria. These are the criteria that our external reviewers will be using to score each application. And so when you're developing your application, obviously you want to make sure you're writing a proposal that's responsive and communicating how your application fits these 7 selection criteria, including relevance to the topic this year and those 4 criteria that I mentioned earlier, the 4 focus areas. The significance of the research in terms of its ability to build new and important actionable evidence, the innovation in your application in terms of the novelty of the system alignment strategy and any innovations you're using in your research approach, your methods, your data, your stakeholder engagement strategies. Fourth, we'll look at the expertise of the research team that's being proposed, both scientific as well as operational and practice-based expertise relevant to the medical, social, and public health systems being aligned. We'll also look at the strength of the larger environment in which your proposal would be implemented, including the collaborating institutions and the resources that they're able to bring to bear and relationships they're able to bring to bear for studying system alignment strategies of interest. Six, we will score and review carefully the scientific merit and the feasibility of the research approach, including the strength of the research design and analytic methods and data sources, as well as the research dissemination and translation strategies being used. And then finally, the capacity for supporting meaningful system alignment and system change strategies. We'll be looking for innovative ways of proposing how you're proposing to move the evidence you produce into the hands of stakeholders who can actually affect system change with that evidence. Again, quick reminder, important dates. The letters of intent are due October 4th. That's just a few days away at the end of this week. Not required, not binding, but highly recommended. Please submit a little one-page letter of intent if you're considering developing a full application. That will be to your advantage in making sure we've got reviewers who are well positioned to understand and appreciate your proposal. November 6th is the deadline for submitting the full proposal by 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We cannot accept late applications, and so please start your submission early. Plan to submit early. In the final 24 hours before that deadline, our capacity to respond to problems and questions tends to be very limited. So we can't guarantee that we're able to assist you with any problem you may have in that last 24 hours. So I encourage you to get started early with developing your proposal. Get familiar with the online application system. Set up your account in that system. Get logged in. Download the templates, for the proposal narrative and the budget worksheet well in advance of that deadline, so you don't run into problems or internet problems or website problems. Again, we'll notify finalists about funding recommendations in mid-February, and we anticipate that these awards will start on or about April 1st, 2020, and they'll operate for up to 3 years, up to 36 months, based on the timeline that you propose. This slide just shows you a little bit about what the RWJF online application and review system looks like. You can link to this page from the Systems for Action website and from the funding opportunity brochure. You can, as this slide shows, you can invite other contributors to be able to access your account, your proposal in the online system, and be able to update and add and edit your proposal. You can do that by just clicking on that Invite Contributors button on the first page of the A&R system. But it's quite a user-friendly system to navigate, and will step you through the process of uploading the items that you need to be a part of your proposal application package. And again, you can type in the email address of any additional people that you'd like to have access to your proposal and be able to edit and add items to your application. Once you've completed your application on the website and you've addressed all of the items on the website, you've uploaded all the content, make sure to hit the submit button as the final step in your process once you've finalized everything and uploaded your documents. Some people get everything into the system and then forget to hit the submit button. So please don't forget to hit that submit button at the end before our deadline of November 6th. These next couple of slides go through some of the more common reasons why people miss deadlines, proposal deadlines at RWJF. And so we encourage you to pay attention to these kind of issues and try to avoid them. Again, if you have a website problem in that last 24 hours, that can be a problem. So start your application early. Complete your application online using the online web-based system. to make sure that you have completed all the required elements. Don't start an application and then restart a new application and get multiple applications started. That can lead to confusion on your part. If you started an application and then you can't find that application again when you go back to the web system, just shoot us an email or give us a call at the Systems for Action program, and we can help you find your application. If you start one, leave the site and then come back and can't find it. Just give us a call. Make sure you save each item after you upload them into the website. And you can always go back and edit items that you save, but make sure to hit that save button when you make changes. And then finally, when you're done, make sure to hit that submit button as your final action to say that your application is complete. Keep in mind that deadline, it's 3 p.m. Eastern time on November 6th. Always good to have a backup person lined up in advance in case there's an emergency in the kind of final hours and as you're moving into submission. So keep those things in mind. So we're at 9:45. We've got 15 minutes, and we are at the Q&A portion of today's call. So I am going to again invite you to submit questions. I see that we already have a number of questions submitted, and I will work through as many of these as we can in the next 15 minutes. And if we have other questions we don't get to, we'll we'll post answers to these on our website as well. So number one, asking how do we define a system alignment mechanism? Well, first of all, I encourage you to go access our 10-page funding opportunity brochure where we describe this in detail. But in a nutshell, a system alignment mechanism is a strategy that is designed to coordinate or connect activities across those three broad areas of medical care, public health, and social services systems. And so it is a system alignment mechanism is a way of connecting activities, operations, implementations across those three broad sectors, so medical care, public health, and social services. There are many different types of system alignment mechanisms that are out there. Again, encourage you to read the funding opportunity brochure, encourage you to read our research agenda where we describe the array of potential system alignment mechanisms that we need evidence on, and encourage you to, again, look at the kinds of studies that we've funded already, the more than 20 studies that have been funded in prior rounds of S4A, get a better sense of what kind of system alignment mechanisms are currently under study, as well as what kind of mechanisms we are still lacking evidence on and need more study on. Let's see. The question about does the funding cover solely research on innovative cross-system approaches, or can this funding be used for both implementation of the programming as well as the research? Yeah, we leave it up to you, the applicant organization, in deciding how best to use both the resources and the time that's available under this call. However, I would again caution you to think carefully about these issues of using resources for implementation versus using resources to support the research of testing the system alignment strategy, and think carefully about how you want to use those resources. This is the funding here is limited. And so obviously, if you're able to leverage other resources that may be supporting implementation of the alignment mechanism, that would lead more resources available, that free up more resources for you to use in supporting the research and studying implementation and impact of your strategy. So yeah, so you've got discretion how you're using your best idea of how best to use the funding, but you want to think carefully about those issues. You also need to think carefully about in terms of to dissemination and implementation of research findings, think carefully about how your system alignment strategy might be sustained and expanded after the conclusion of your research project. So those are some of the things you may want to consider. But really, it's up to you to propose how best to use the resources in your proposal. Question about what we mean under financing incentives component. Well, financing I think is pretty self-explanatory, although we have some more detail in the funding opportunity brochure. Financing, we look at ways of procuring and securing the resources, the monetary resources that are needed to support system alignment, aligning activities across medical, social, and public health systems. And other kinds of incentives, non-financial incentives, may involve, again, non-monetary ways of encouraging organizations and sectors to work together. Again, take a look. We do have a more detailed explanation in the funding opportunity brochure about our interest in financing, studies that address financing, as well as non-financial incentives that support system alignment. Is a question about, is it mandatory that all applications are associated with 501c3? The lead applicant organization needs to be either a public entity or a 501c3 based in the U.S. Those criteria need to be met by the lead organization. So either a governmental agency or a 501c3 to be eligible for this funding opportunity. And again, more information, more description on that is in the funding opportunity brochure. So please download that 10-pager and read the eligibility criteria carefully. Let's see, a question about somebody working on a dissertation for a PhD in social work. And question about their interest in studying state child protective service workers and looking at stress, etc. Could that be relevant? Absolutely, that could possibly be relevant. Child and family services are certainly included in our description of the social services system. So that is one of the sectors that's relevant and that needs to be addressed in the Systems for Action research program. So it sounds like your research, your idea potentially could be relevant for S4A. You'd want to think about how that social services sector of interest could be better aligned with the two other sectors that need to be addressed, the medical sector and the public health sector. But your focus on child protective services is definitely an area that fits within our definition of the social services sector. That's one of the three sectors that needs to be implicated in the system alignment mechanisms under study. Good question. Let's see, a question about studies that look at improving health outcomes through improved income and housing stability. Yeah, that sounds relevant. Obviously, income and housing supports are, again, other important elements that fit within our definition of the social services sector. And so a study that's looking at how to better align and integrate those activities, income and housing, with relevant medical and public health systems potentially would be a good fit and responsive to Systems for Action, our research call. Question about how often do we issue CFP under the Systems for Action program? We have, as I mentioned, Systems for Action has been up and running now for 5 years. This is the 4th call for proposal that we've released. So we have released one call for proposal in each of the last 4 years of this program. That's been our history so far. Again, this is the 2019 call for proposals that we're now that is now open. The 4th annual call that we've had in the program's history. Let's see. Question about study scope, community level, neighborhood level, state level. Yeah, possibly. We're looking for you to give us the idea of what's the relevant unit of analysis and unit of study. However, I would encourage you to again look at that, the third element in our the focus of this year's topic, which has to do with studying system level change. So you want to think about, make sure that at whatever level you're adopting for your unit of intervention and unit of analysis, that your study in some way is able to examine system level change and system level impact in terms of thinking broadly about medical, social, and public health delivery and financing systems. But in terms of your scale of study, community, neighborhood, state, national, that's you've got degrees of freedom in terms of thinking where the best, what the best and most feasible scale is going to be for your study. A question about the outside-in focus. What about systems that have some level of integration with outside sectors and want to strengthen those collaborations? Absolutely. That's what that's at the heart of the Systems for Action program, is in studying ways of strengthening connections across the medical, social, and public health systems. But again, the caveat with this year's call, 2019 call, we're interested in system alignment mechanisms that are designed and implemented principally in the social services or public health sector. So think through in your research idea how that might be operationalized. But absolutely, our program, we're focused on studying integration strategies across those three sectors. And the question is like school-based health centers. So yeah, health centers that are based in an educational institution. That institution, schools are primarily educational institutions. That fits our definition of the social service sector. So if you're looking at a system alignment strategy that's being implemented primarily in the educational sector, that would meet our definition of an outside-in strategy in this year's call. Let's see. We're looking for proposals that meet all four of the research criteria, all four of the research priorities outlined, or at least one. So good question, and the answer is yes. Your proposal needs to address all four of those research priorities to be responsive in this year's call. The outside-in approach, the focus on system level impact, the focus on including a focus on financing incentives, and the focus on health equity. Your proposal needs to in some way address all four of those priorities to be responsive to this year's call. It is a more limited focus this year in our Systems for Action program, and that's because these are the areas where we still have substantial gaps in evidence and where our current portfolio of S4A studies are not addressing these areas. So that's the reason for our more limited targeted focus this year on those four elements. So please take a careful look at those elements and think about how your idea might be positioned to fit those elements. Let's see. Is there a solid place for academic and community-based initiatives? Well, yes, of course. And we're, I think, especially interested in studies that can have both, that can bring both academic research expertise and community-based knowledge and practice into the research team. Is there a preference for projects originating and funded through community organizations? I would say there is a preference, certainly a preference for studies that are heavily informed by community-based stakeholders, and where you've got community-based stakeholders, actively engaged in the study. In terms of where the idea comes from, where it originated, who the lead entity is, in terms of who's the primary grantee, those are details that we leave it up to you as the applicant organization in thinking through what's the best way to organize the project and to implement it within the time and the resources that you've got available. But certainly having community-based expertise on the team is something that we are very interested in, and that can be very, very advantageous for this type of research. Question, will we be able to receive comments about the proposal after it's submitted? The foundation has a standard policy of not providing comments and critiques on proposals that come out of the review process. That's a standard policy of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. However, as a National Program Office, what we typically do is we do synthesize what we're able to learn about the strengths and weaknesses of proposals in each review process, and we are able to share some general findings and lessons learned about strengths and weaknesses of proposals. We try to share that information back with applicants. But as a rule, and that's something we do as a National Program Office based at the University of Colorado. But the foundation, as a matter of policy, does not provide comments or critiques on individual applications. Okay. Well, I do see we do have a few questions we haven't been able to get to. We are at the top of the hour. So I do need to close out our application. Encourage you, if you have other questions, best thing to do is to send them to us via email, Systems for Action, our Systems for Action email address, which is on the slide set. It's on our website. It's on the funding opportunity brochure. And we'll be glad to answer other questions as you're developing your application. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. Thank you for your interest in Systems for Action. We hope to see a letter of intent from you, and we hope to see an application from you around your great ideas for how to better align medical, social, and public health systems. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.